Hello and welcome to the State of Events, where event professionals connect. An experienced educational warrior that speaks truth to power, Coach Mark James is a vivacious servant leader. He has extensive experience in student engagement, achievement, discovery, and behavioral learning. His work has expanded to support entrepreneurs and business leaders in educational resources, strategic planning, budgeting and forecasting, operational supervision, and relationship management. He has traveled the world with his powerful message of empowerment by the promotion of healing. Grab your notebooks, friends, to embrace, empower, and educate yourself with Coach Mark James as he discusses the barriers blocking the dreams of the modern entrepreneur. In today's episode, Key Barriers to Growth. Welcome, Mr. Coach Mark James. Everyone is going to know you by Coach because the entire time I'm going to call you Coach because you're my coach.
No worries.
You are my coach, but I am so excited to be talking with you finally. We have been graced to be able to work together in a very particular way right now. But during this time, I'm actually just going to talk to you a little bit about your story and your heart for entrepreneurship and growing small businesses, growing communities. So can you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
My name is Mark James. Everybody calls me Coach James. I am a teacher by trade, an educator. Spent several years as a teacher, educator, administrator, working in those places that many people would call not the locations that you want to build your career. But I saw gold mines in sandy places, so to speak, where I saw the opportunity to be able to help young people and use my career, my trade, my knowledge to be able to do that. 20 years ago, we created a nonprofit called Aware Incorporated that what we tried to do was work to empower people and really working towards empowering people, young people of color between the ages of 15 to 18. On the most important decision of life of what do you do with your life? Where do you go? Do you go to college? Do you go to vocational school? What do you do? Do you do the military? And I really wanted to start there because that was where I learned my craft, as in, everybody has what I believe are gifts that are given from a higher source. And I think that was the gift that God gave me to be able to sow into people's lives, to be able to make them believe and understand the real eternal value of who they are. And many times the difference between failure and success is an opportunity. So after I left the education field, I decided to pursue a love of mine, which was in athletics, football. I've been able to coach football pretty much I guess I could say on every level, and pretty much I've had opportunities to go around the world with it. I've coached games in China. I've been able to work at the NFL level. I've been able to work at the collegiate level as a head coach. And I was a longtime head football coach at a high school. And all that was pouring into our young people and our youth and being able to make impacts in their lives. I got to the point a year and a half ago where I've always, wanted to do something else. And I made the decision to become a business owner. And not only one, I started two businesses. And I decided to take the skills, like I said, everybody has their own skill set, and be able to use it. One side is consulting, and the second side is for my nonprofit organization.
You have this wonderful name that you developed, the Urban Trauma Healing Institute. Can you please tell our listeners what is that? And then where did that name come from? That is an amazing title and name for an organization. And it's very honed in. It's very specific. But can you talk a little bit about what that organization is and why you focus on trauma? What kind of trauma exactly are we talking about?
I specifically look at urban settings and the education that is given in urban settings. when you take a look at the job of a teacher, with all the different things such as standardized testing, recidivism, school violence, turnover of staff, teachers have given up becoming the gatekeeper and they have become police officers. And the whole scenario or system that is there in place of the pipeline from the classroom to the prison is very real. In the state of Virginia, it costs $13,580 to educate one public school child. That same child incarcerated is $113,000. So where the term urban trauma came from is because there's what I call layers of trauma upon not only educators, but the students, the families. And the scientific name for this is vicarious trauma. And the best way to explain it is if you can think about layers of sheets and you go to a nice hotel and there's a fitted sheet, then you've got a sheet on top, then you might have another sheet on top, then you have a blanket. Well, that is the same that's the same in reference to what urban trauma is. What urban trauma is talking precisely about is about the different layers that are put upon our lives with the different traumatic events or the different traumatic events that happen in our life that we don't deal with and that we put in a mental space in our mind that we have to move on and we have to, we have to be tough and we have to be strong. If you look in the inner cities, our kids are killing each other and, drug issues are still prevalent. And there's young people growing up without fathers because they're incarcerated. These things have an effect. And those are layers that cause vicarious trauma. And what ends up happening with vicarious trauma, Sonia, is that you lead with your vicarious trauma. You lead with your layers that you have, and you are 3-4 layers away from reality. So you're never really reaching people, or you're never really able to link your circles with people because your trauma relates as the buffer. The word healing in the company's name is that we have to have answers. We just can't state the problem. We have to have answers, and there are answers to be able to dealing with a lot of the pain that's going on in our communities. It's called empowerment. It's called love. I have a thing that says embrace, empower, and educate. The 3 E's. So it's called E cubed. And in those 3 things, while the words are so simple, they're simple to say, if we can follow those 3 things, we can change one family and a child at a time. And that needs to be what we do. So that's Urban Trauma Healing Institute, working with the whole child, working with the whole family, empowerment, job opportunity, and so forth. You'll hear me talking about the 10-point plan. And one of the parts about the 10-point plan, a small subsection, is we teach young people the things that they don't get taught in school. They don't get taught good credit, bad credit. Is there a difference between street credit and the bank? Street credit can't get you money in the bank, right? So we go to school and we're not really being taught these things. We're not really being taught about the stock market. We're not really being taught how to start a business, how to start an LLC, how to start a nonprofit, how to turn an idea into a fiscal opportunity. And you look on the internet and you see all these people that might not be from these communities that are starting businesses at 12 years old, 13, 14 years old. And our kids are playing video games. I remember Nas made a song that said, we're playing with PlayStations and they're building space stations. Okay.
Come on now.
We really have to start to really look at developing our young people in our communities and teaching them the things that many of us did not get till 30 years old, 40 years old, but teaching them those things now because they're going to need it to be able to survive.
There are tons of things as a small business owner that I wish I would have learned in 8th grade. I mean, they were teaching me a bunch of stuff that I don't know how much of that I actually use. I had to learn that when I got into the real world. And so I'm wondering, are there some tools that I can bring as an event professional to the local community to teach some things that I might know about starting a business to an 8th grader, to a high schooler? How can I get involved with that if I was looking to do that?
First thing that we have to do is value ourselves. And then when we value ourselves, we need to take inventory of our skills. And when you take inventory of your skills and then you have that intrinsic value about yourself, now you say, what can I use my skills to either give or create more opportunities for somebody to not just eat the fish that I'm giving them, but also go catch the new fish. So I start having conversations with people all the time, right now on Zoom all the time. And then I say, tell me about yourself. And, if you say that you're an event planner and they start talking and they tell me, well, I've done this program where it was 500 people that were there and we had to organize 7 to 10 things at the very beginning of the program. Those are things that our kids need to hear. Those are skill sets that can change somebody's life. Finance, organization, how to understand a calendar, how to communicate. One of the things that we don't know how to do is communicate, okay? And more important than communicating, being able to listen. If you're planning events, you have to listen to what the customer wants, internalize it, and be able to deliver the vision in reality. So there are so many skill sets that people in your industry or any industry that you could think of, but everybody's got to itemize the talents, right? They got to itemize the gifts that they've been given and the talents that they've developed. And they need to put it on paper. I teach, put it on paper and then itemize and say, how can I give this back? Because here's the reality of it. And I really want to be very straight to the point with this. I teach this. If you don't reach that young person might reach you at the ATM machine. And that means instead of Sonia Collier having an opportunity to impart in this young man or young lady's life, the street has taken advantage of it. So it is very, very, very important. My nonprofit is also based in mentorship. It's very important that we understand the value of giving back. And I advise anybody that's listening to us, don't ever think that you don't have something to give, because there are young people that don't know the direction a lot of times where they're going. And there's things that you're doing that you might say that might give the light.
One of the episodes that we're going to be, or segments rather, that we're going to be launching, I talk a little bit about in this particular episode about the problem solving skills needed in the event industry are huge. Like if you cannot do the simplest type of problem solving in our industry, it's going to take you some time to build because the problem solving and the execution of things obviously is, that goes without saying, but then the execution of the problem solving has to even be bigger, because in a moment's time, when you're working at events, you have to be able on your feet to pivot in the moment. There's a fire over here. There's a fire over here. There's an argument over here. You have to be able to really be able to problem solve in the moment. And that is huge. And I think if I was a young person again, and I had the opportunity to link up with a mentor who was really showing me what putting me in those real circumstances, role playing in those real circumstances, this kind of problem solving can just transcend industries. We can take it wherever. I want to transition a bit to talk, and I want to end with this 10-point plan, because I wanted that to be the thing that we end with, so it's fresh on our minds. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about this, the entrepreneur. I just had some questions here that, in your experience working with just people across all industries, what are some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that you're noticing that entrepreneurs are facing?
3 words: bet on yourself, right? Many people don't invest in themselves. Many people are brave enough to do the paperwork, but not brave enough to brace the storm. So it's It's more than becoming an entrepreneur, because becoming an entrepreneur is a theory, but actually being able to brace the storm when you can't even pay yourself because you want to make sure that your business is profitable that week, that you have to make those sacrifices when your staff members can't do it, you have to do it. And I liken being an entrepreneur to being a head college coach. When I was a head college football coach, just like you do in the planning world, I had to make pivot situations. I had to make changes on the drop of the dime based on the good of the order and the good of the group. So I would say that when somebody says to themselves, listen, I'm going to bet on myself. I choose me. Because no matter how much of a good person you are, one day you have to bet on yourself. And it's a bet that you have to hold the cards and believe in. And I tell people all the time, you've got to have faith in the process. I call it TTP, trust the process.
TTP. I learned that recently. That's my new one, TTP.
There you go, TTP. It is a beautiful thing. Frederick Douglass said, without struggle, there's no progress. Well, obviously, he was talking about a whole nother timeline. But when you're an entrepreneur, that struggle is what makes you respect when you actually start seeing cash flow. It makes you respect and not go crazy and not know that you got to reinvest it back in the business. So trust the process. I want to tell everybody that's listening to you to TTP. The process is real, but the process and the roadmap will take you and your business to where it's supposed to go. The last piece of advice that I would give you, that I would give anybody on this, if you're starting a business, the first thing that's going to happen is that some of the closest people to you are going to doubt you, are going to say, you think that's the right thing that you do? Being an entrepreneur is a lonely world. Why? Because you're seeing something that nobody else sees.
How do I practice what you're saying? Because it pertains to believing in myself, but how can we then separate having a sort of a good selfish, right? A good selfish, but also in a lot of the things that I've seen that you've put together presentation wise, it can't be about you. Right. So how do I make it not about me with this idea of also making it about me?
Great question. You can never be a great we until you have a defined me.
Say that again. Say that.
You can never be a great we until you have a defined me. There's many people that get into relationships and and don't define the me. So what I'm saying is, when I say TTP and I'm talking about develop you can't be a good teammate if we're on a football team and you've never caught a football and we're in the Super Bowl and you have to run for the route and you got to catch this ball. You haven't developed the me. So while we're going to the game, we're practicing, it's always about the we, but I'm robbing you if I don't develop me. So there's a difference between being selfish on the me and not thinking about the we, or being mindful that it's important that the me is developed, being the best me possible. You can't give to anybody if you don't define that. It's like an empty can, right? And you shake it around back in the day and it's got the top, you put it in and you shake it and you hear the rattling sound. If you don't define and put the value and the liquid in that can to where the can is liquid is coming outside of the can and shaking and falling over your hand, then how are you sharing? You can't share anything if you don't define me.
I love that. It's more of this defining.
Define. It's not selfish.
Right.
It's defining. And that's entrepreneurial power, because guess what? If you do it right, you have the ability to affect somebody's life with a job. So, but you've got to do the me right, because if you're not a good leader, it's not worth it. So you've got to define the me to get to a great we. And that's at the core foundation of when you think about servant leadership. In order to be a great servant leader, you got to first be a servant. How do you be a good servant? You got to learn how to define the me and make sure the me has the tools and the skill set to serve.
Man, without jumping all over, because I want to go into that servant leadership, boy. I want to go into that, but we'll get to that. Let me ask this too. So we've identified some obstacles, and then in my quest to identifying these obstacles, in your experience, whether it be working with clients who procure your services, or whether that be just from maybe the mentorship that you do with entrepreneurs and so on and so forth, what are maybe 3 consistent pitfalls you are always noticing that someone is getting into, particularly those who are attempting to do what you just described in the, I believe I'm called to leadership. I believe I'm called to own this business. I believe I'm called to, be an entrepreneur and steward this idea. What are these pitfalls that it's like, man, they're doing the same thing my last client did, the same thing my last client did? Number one,
they have to not be the paper, but be the product.
Say that again.
They have to not be the paper, but be the product.
Oh, wow.
So many people can do the paperwork, but few people can produce the product. Can you produce the product, or are you just writing business plans? The second thing is relationship, and break it down into syllables. Can you relate? Can you relate? If you can't relate, then you don't understand what I think is the onus of being a good person to serve their customers. For instance, when I go into a restaurant with my family, they know if the waiter or waitress comes over and is terrible, right? I might walk out. Because to me, I've learned a long time ago that it's always the customer first. When I was teaching reading to 6th graders, when I was teaching reading to 18 to 21-year-old kids, A apple ah, it was always the customer first. Relationship. If you can't have relationship, you'll never be an entrepreneur. And then the last thing would be, don't let your shine outdo your grind.
Whoa.
Don't let the shiny objects outdo what you're supposed to get done. A common pitfall I see with a lot of businesses, especially I have friends that own restaurants. They come out, everybody comes and we get together. We say, look, we're going to help this restaurant. This is our alumni, right? They went to our school. Everybody goes there. Everybody patronizes it, correct? But they move from driving their Toyota Maxima to a 500 Benz in 6 months. You can't make your shine outdo your grind. It's a patient process. And this is going to sound totally crazy to people that are going to listen to this. When you start a business, and this was told to me by my mentor, who is, I think if you have more than $1 million, or more than, if you enter that other zero bracket, you got some money, right? He said to me, most businesses fail because most entrepreneurs want to make money in the first year. And there's a difference between making the money and spending the money. And I thought about it, right?
I'm just to that point, I made negative $4,000 my first year of business.
Right. But I thought about it, and I was sitting in my office and I was working 7 days a week and I wasn't getting any calls. And I was like, whoa, but I kept working. And I remember what he said. Then all of a sudden, every day there's something going on. I mean, we're snowed in, and my day started at 9 o'clock this morning, and it's 8 p.m. Eastern, and there was no gaps in between. There was a 2-hour gap in between. I got my family something to eat, and I sat right back down. And what I'm saying to you is, those are the three things that I think. But the last one, please, everybody listen. You pay yourself by the result that you build. Build first the product. And when your product pays for itself, that is when your business is moving. What outdoes the fear of failure is this one concept. Are you going to continue to build somebody else's dream before you attempt your own? When you go to work at Walmart, you're uplifting their dream. When you go to work at the city park and rec, you're uplifting somebody else's dream. Somebody is a supervisor or a director, and they're walking around proud with a 6-figure job. And there's nothing wrong with being a follower, but there has to come a point in everybody's life where you must follow your own dreams. Sometimes your spouse or your kids are not going to see it because it's an eternal fabric that's interwoven into your spirit that a greater source is guiding you, but nobody else can see it. And that's what being an entrepreneur is. And you got to be able to be strong. And sometimes it's lonely. Even if somebody's directly around you, it's a lonely feeling when you're trying to do it and somebody says, hey, how much money did you make? Your wife or your husband say to you, are we going on vacation? Right? So I want everybody to understand it, but it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Beautiful.
Even if you have heard some of the concepts that you are speaking about, it's so good to hear it in so many different ways because, every way that something is told it speaks to a different person. And this is speaking to me on just taking it back to some basics, right? And remembering how important some of the basics were in starting my business and becoming an entrepreneur. And that first year, albeit the most challenging, obviously, for obvious reasons, just getting back to this servicehood or this service-based leadership, what became clear to me is some of the things that we did running our business when we first launched. People would look at us or they would see on paper what we did, and they would absolutely say, that was a stupid business idea. That was a stupid business choice. Why would you do that? And one thing that I've always had to hone in on when talking about our company and why we make decisions is because we're doing things different because we want the results that people don't really get sometimes. I believe that I have been entrusted to steward my business and particularly, our online community. I have been entrusted to do this because of a huge, bigger picture that is not readily available for people to understand when they see it on paper. And my family, we've developed this idea of generosity that is ridiculous on paper. It makes absolutely no sense. I remember the first year that we were in business, we were absolutely the last to get paid if we ever got paid. And that was sometimes because somebody would call and be like, hey, I'm trying to get to, and this is just about the heart of our company. We had a employee model out of the gate. And so we actually provided jobs, that we had employees. And we were committed to making sure that we were able to work in situations and take on contracts in which we could help people who were coming out of the prison system get work. And sometimes it was, I want to get to this job, this assignment that you put me on as a temp. I want to get to this temp assignment, but I don't have bus money. I don't have Uber money. And, I'm really not trying to make an excuse. It's just the reality of my life. And we, from time to time again, we're giving gift cards, transition or transportation money, making sure all of our staff was fed if they, even if they brought their own lunch. We would, I remember catering one time, our entire tax, the office that did our taxes that year. I remember catering their entire lunch one day. And I say all this as to say, when you have a heart of servicehood, you just make different choices. And those different choices on paper for any other maybe business savvy person is like, we can't afford that. Living generous is not something that you're looking at your checkbook and saying, well, I can't afford that. Well, I can't afford that. I really can't do that because this is what it means for my business. And there will be some real conversations where you can't afford something. But the reality of it is that when you live a life of generosity, when you live a life of servicehood, you make different decisions and they don't look normal on paper. So can you explain a little bit about what a service-based leader, what does that look like?
So I want to give you some real-time application to something that happened to me on Tuesday morning at 7:00. So it was about 6:30 in the morning. Okay. I received a call on Facebook, and when you get one of those messenger calls, you're like, who's calling me on Facebook at 6:30 in the morning? The gentleman that was calling me, he was a young man that I actually went to high school with, and in 1993-ish, I had an opportunity. I was working at a school, and he was a Army recruiter, and he was assigned to our school. The reason why he called me, he started talking to me. But besides that, I'd never really seen him again except for on social media. He said, I wanted to call you about something, Coach James. I said, what's up, man? Talk to me. He said, there's something that I want you to understand. I said, okay. He said, my wife, you may not have known it was my wife, but his wife has a nervous condition and her memory is going. And he said, my wife actually, she worked for a prison, a juvenile prison, and in Florida, and you had a male group, a pre-fatherhood initiative group, and you welcome in 20 young men from that prison, and you guys signed a contract to where they would actually still be somewhat incarcerated, but they would go to the school system and they would come and they were part of my program, right? All of them did well, graduated, went to college. Two of them played in the NFL. But he started talking about, he said, every day he starts, he does little games for her to remember. And she said, man, you know who I would like to see? He said, who? Coach James. And she started telling him about what I had done. She said, Coach James? You talking about Mark James? And he said at that moment, he started to cry. And the reason why was when I played games in North Carolina, I didn't even know this. I didn't know this. And I'm going to get to the point. When I played football games against North Carolina schools, he lived in like South Carolina. He would drive to every one of those games. I never even knew he was there, right? And he basically told me, he was like, thank you for everything that you've done in my life and my wife's life. Now, let's get to the point that you mentioned, right? To me, I'm probably my hardest critic. So I tell people all the time, I might have won a game, but I won a lot of games, but I've never really enjoyed the win because I was always thinking about something else, the next game, or making sure my kids that were on the team were going to be smart that night. So I say all that to say this. Being a servant leader is somebody that you've got to plant seeds and you don't stand over them to wait for them to grow. You have to be a farmer that farms on faith. And I want you to understand that I believe in hard work, but I believe that your hard work is also based on pure leadership. If you lead with a title, you're not leading. I never expected that call. I probably will never tell anybody else that story. Why? Because those people that I helped, I was farming, okay? And I wasn't expecting to reap any harvest because it was all about them. And to get that call 6:30 in the morning unexpectedly on Facebook Messenger is evidence that if you TTP and plant and go, you will find the success that you need to find.
Man, I am wrecked. Wrecked. You plant the seeds and don't wait. Shut up. Man.
Just leave them alone.
Oh my gosh. That's hard. That's a different kind of character, coach. That's a different.
Hey.
I'm wrecked.
Again, plan it and go. Don't wait. And I'm telling you, that concept to be a leader, the people that you're leading in your business, plan it and go. The reason why you want to do that is because you want those people to value your business as though it was theirs.
Yeah.
And when you plan it and go, people will respect it more than planning and say, man, I put this and this into you. I want to see it grow. No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. It so doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. Wow. We got 5 minutes to spare. Can you please tell us what is the 10-point plan and how can we get a hold of it?
The 10-point plan is a training and development system that I use on a mentoring online platform. In that 10-point plan, we cover several different things. And I'll give you some examples. Like the first point is self-determination. Okay, so we talk about the innate psychological needs of our young people, and we talk about how we can turn around what seems to be failure into success. Well, if they understand the concept of self-determination, they'll understand how to build out their foundation to be successful. Again, remember what I said, the difference between failure and success is an opportunity. The second point is cultural conflict resolution. We have to, within ourselves, be able to deal with all of the conflicts that happen within our own cultures. So you start out Black, white, Hispanic, okay, and then there's all the inter dealings and conflicts that everybody's racial organization has, right? And you've got to be able to understand strategies, how to survive that. Because within our own cultures, we could kind of get depleted and lost. The third concept is self-confidence. There's many people out there that I call it the beggar theory, that they only believe that they're worthy to be that. The next point is removal of self-hate. You got to remove it, okay? There's a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Freire, and it speaks about how oppressed people, if they're not clear, if they're not concise, they will turn around and oppress their own. This is something that you're going to like, the overstanding of entrepreneurial power. There's no greater power than your own business. We should be a collector of businesses. There's no greater power.
I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time? The overs? I think I know I heard you right, but what?
I'm borrowing from Bob Marley. Instead of understanding, the overstanding.
Yes.
The overstanding of entrepreneurial power.
Ooh.
Because you have to understand that the ability to create on your own is a power unmeasured. The next one is cutting the poverty umbilical cord. Understanding the building of wealth and the importance of it. Then you have mental health repair. We got to remove the urban stains that are transgenerational amongst us. Political participation. You're voting against Trump or you're voting for Biden, but you're letting the wrong mayor take over your city and
say that again.
They got to understand political participation. They got to understand how to. I was just speaking to a sister that today that was a large part of the Black Lives Matter movement in Richmond. She was the one of the most vocal and leaders. And then I said to her, "What now? What do we do now?" The next one is critical thinking. Got to be able to engage in those conversations that are high order. We got to change a lot of how we think. You understand what I'm saying? Again, going back to Nas, they are building space stations and we're playing PlayStations. I was in DC for the Black Caucus maybe about 6 years ago, and there was a study that said that the difference between Black youth, Black and Hispanic youth, and white youth from the ages of 16 to 25 is that they both use technology, but one group uses it just to text and social media, and the other one is building mainframes and understanding how to get how to turn that online substance into a fiscal opportunity. So I'm not saying that we're not doing it, but there is a big, wide gap in discretion. The last one is academic and vocational opportunities. So we've got to teach that there are a plethora of opportunities to our young people. We just can't teach the golden dream anymore. The golden dream has taken us 20 years off base. So we have to open up those opportunities to our children at a very early age. I remember building out steps and working as a carpenter at 16 years old with my uncle in Englewood, New Jersey, okay? Building steps, framing out steps, and I hated it. But then I was like, you know what? There's got to be something to this because those guys, I'm looking at what they were driving to work, but they were wearing jeans and, cut off skirts. But they were driving back then $50,000, $60,000 vehicles. So we got to be careful what we teach our kids. What is the American dream? It's what we design. It's what we design, right? So,
wow.
The 10-point plan is part of my mentoring program that we wrote. There's a book that is scheduled to come out, the urban trauma teaching strategies for teachers that are going to be out later this spring. And those points will be in there. But we do offer opportunities for companies, organizations, school systems that want to be a part of that online mentoring space that are looking for something different. People need something different. So this is a accumulation of 20-something years of working with youth.
I've been running into many either undergrad or grad students who are saying that they are at schools in which they can make their own major. They put a bunch of different classes together that they believe aligns to this major of what they want to do in the world. And I was like, we didn't have that when I was in college. And this is phenomenal to me because it should be more, your degree should be more, your training rather, should be more reflective of what you want to do within these sort of niche careers that we, have available to us now. And so I think that this is, if we could have had, something like the healing school, different classes and curriculum that I could have picked from, like what a different place we would be. But hope is available to the young people of today, that they are going to absolutely have a different society and a different world than maybe myself or yourself has grew up in. This has been one of the richest interviews yet. And I'm not just saying that. I have the absolute and complete blessing, pleasure, whatever, to be able to reach out to Coach Mark whenever I want. And it's so great because you have just this perspective that I've never really seen in someone before. And it has not only enriched my life, but it enriches my work and it enriches those who I can speak to. How can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you? What's all your social media stuff? How can we stay connected with Coach Mark?
If they could go to www.coachjamesspeaks, all my social media is connected on that website. You would also see a sneak peek of the 10-point plan, and you'll be able to look at some of the things that we've done and continue to do, throughout the United States and really throughout the world in this new virtual process. But they can definitely reach me there, and they could also email me directly from my website.
You've been listening to The State of Events, where event professionals connect. For more episodes, you can find us on Spotify and iTunes. To engage with us on social media, look for @the_state of events. Also, we would love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions, topic ideas, or if you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, send us an email to inquiries@thestateofevents.com. Thank you so much for joining The State of Events, where event professionals connect.